75th Anniversary Radio. Pleased to be joined in studio from a guy from Maui, believe it or not, Dick Long, a guy that mentored me back in 1985 when I first stepped into this business. And Dick, maybe for the listeners, just a little background as it relates to radio, as it relates to specifically WMOA back in the day.
Well, back in the day, we didn't have any of this technology that you have in here now, and it's like, boy, we could have used a lot less space back then because we would have had this technology. But I just remember tapes everywhere, all over the place. Where did we put that one? Oh, yeah, it's in so-and-so's office.
Right. So just to make you feel at home, we do still have the carts over here, and we have the old reel-to-reel from back in the day up here as well, up above, just to have that good feel.
Well, I imagine that you probably dig back and pull some stuff off some tapes sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came into the biz, July 1985, you were, tell me what hat you had on at the time and maybe how long you'd been here prior.
Well, let's see, we moved down here in 79, and I started in sales and sports. And matter of fact, I think the first week I was here, that I went out and did a Marietta College baseball game at a regional. That was my first, my first games. So that was quite an introduction to what's going on here in Marietta at the time. Although the technology was not that much different from Kenton, Ohio to Marietta, Ohio. But Marietta College baseball was really a big thing for me because that's where I started here when we first moved here. And then I was doing sales for Ray Rosenblum at the time, and Dan Latham was sales manager. So it was a good time to be coming to Marietta in the summer of '79.
All right, and so as it relates to Big John Wharf, would he have been in a picture? Obviously not till later in terms of buying the radio station, but did you know him?
I think I ran into him very first time, the first week up at Ohio Northern. I think that's what it was. It was at Ohio Northern at the OAC tournament.
Oh, sure.
That was the first one, and yes, we ran into him up there that week. It was quite a deal. Big John was always really great to us, even when he was not at WMOA. He helped us more than once when we were on the road and something wasn't the way we expected it to be when we got there, and he made some really good arrangements for us and helped us actually get on the air a couple of times.
So 79 is when you jump in, and then how long with the radio station?
I was here until 85. And then I think I came back 1 year to help you with some baseball, maybe 2 years. I know it was 1 year after that when I was off in the solid waste industry of all places. Yeah. But, that was 5 years here. We had a lot of changes. I think there were 3 ownership changes during that 5 years, and then Big John came in. And obviously straightened things around, and then obviously you have done a great job here.
It's been a lot of fun. I remember a couple of things, and just for the listeners, I was doing color, and Dick was doing play-by-play right out of the gate into Marietta High School Tiger football. But I can remember some road games, and you were the classic old-school AM radio guy. And on the way back from wherever we were, it doesn't matter where we were doing the games, but you would scratch in LS or Chicago or KDKA or something like that. I remember it so well, but you don't know at the time, but how much I learned from you, how to do my job in terms of sports broadcasting.
Well, we had to know things back then. Perhaps they don't need to know as much now about the technology.
Right.
I don't know if we ever had to rig anything when you and I went to a game, but I know we had to do a lot of things where I would go to a game and the phone company would have just dropped dropped wires without a box to plug into. One time I got lucky and we could actually hook those two wires directly to a telephone, but I had to take the telephone apart to hook the red to the red and the green to the green.
Yeah, sure.
So that was a good time because I was able to do it directly from the lines that they installed. But one time they just dropped down a pole, and the pole was at least 500 feet from where we were going to be doing the broadcast. So that required some serious, and we had already had the hardware just in case that happened. We had a big roll of
The spool, we call it.
Yes. And I understand you still have it somewhere, but we needed it, and we ran that wire and ran it over at least 500 feet to the card table we had set up to do the broadcast at the time. So we had to do a lot of things like that back.
Could we use the analogy that it was a lot like what the Roadrunner used to blow up the coyote when he ran it to blow up the coyote at the end of the dynamite, right?
Where you would see the plunger go down and you would see the cord. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
75th anniversary WMOA starting in 1946. We're going to share some great memories and talk to some great WMOA alum over the course of this September. Dick Long is our guest. He's my mentor, my friend from back in the mid-'80s, and we'll be back with more right after this.
From a garage in Williamstown to high atop Harmor Hill for 75 years, WMOA Marietta.
75th anniversary radio. So much fun to be able to go back and talk about some of the morning men, some of the sports directors, some of the news guys. And I don't know, Dick Long is our guest right now, currently residing and has for a long time in Hawaii, right?
We've been there 20 years now already. Time flies. Although we really like it there, and I know you visited, so I know you know what it's like.
Sure. So I'll give you my first thought to that. In 1996, and I was in the process of buying the radio station, and my dad was doing what you know, and we'll try to explain it to the listeners, but stringers from the Ohio State games, and that was, being sent out in this instance to WIBA in Wisconsin or WJR in Detroit, and what you do during the course of a game is you just call and do a recap, or you go on a live show, a sports show that they might have, and fill them in on what's happening at Ohio Stadium. And so he was in the midst of doing that when he passed away in September, and Ohio State at the time, Steve Snap was the athletic director, had called me, or actually came down to visit, and asked me to fill in. And I'll never forget, I didn't really know the whole gravitas of doing this until you sent me a note or an email and said, "Hey, you're doing a good job. I just heard you on the Armed Forces Radio Network. I'm in Hawaii." And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in Hawaii. So explain how, maybe for the listeners, did that surprise you?
Well, it surprised me, but after hearing all the facts afterwards, it doesn't surprise me. Right. But, anytime when you're 5,000 miles away and you hear a familiar voice and you say, "Oh, hey," it's wonderful. You see somebody on TV or whatever. The other thing about being 5,000 miles away, we're 6 hours time difference too.
Right.
So we might see or hear something early in the morning there that's going on in the middle of the afternoon here.
Yeah. So, and as it relates to the state-of-the-art technology, and we continue every day to get more and more, but now we do and often brag about the idea that somebody in Korea that taught at Marietta College was listening to the Marietta College baseball games while they're in Korea teaching English. It's just crazy, but we get these stories now. Saudi Arabia, somebody that works for Chevron or America Styrenics is listening to the news. And so you went into the news, and we still, you might say Ray Rosenblum said you're going to sell. Everybody sells, but you're also going to do the game on Friday night, and we also need you to do the news. So kind of give us that transition of hats, if you will.
Well, yeah, anytime somebody leaves, especially if they leave quickly, it's hard to replace them. And somebody that's been here and had some connection with the people in the community, that's another thing. And I met so many very wonderful people here in this area. You get to know people in either at the sheriff's office or at the police station or whatever by being in the news here. That was, like I said, the mayors that you deal with and the other people in politics, and you just get to see people perhaps differently than they appear to be on TV or even in the radio situation. But that was, like I said, when somebody leaves quickly, somebody else has to step in.
Right.
And probably at that particular time, I was probably the one with the most on-air experience.
Yes.
And that's what you do, especially in a relatively small station. You have to take over when somebody else leaves. And it was not a chore for me because I liked doing it. I liked being on the air. It was a fun time for me.
Reminds me of another thought, and we'll take a break and be back with that, about being on the air together, different times, and different things that we created as radio station people. Sometimes you create your own programming, and we did that back in the early to mid-'80s as well. Johnny Wharf, along with Dick Long, my mentor from when I first started in the business, visiting from Hawaii, but in studio as we celebrate 75 years of radio, WMOA.
From a garage in Williamstown to high atop Harmar Hill for 75 years, WMOA, Marietta.
Johnny Wharf, and it's the fireside chat, it feels like anyway, here in September as we regress and talk to some folks that have been through the halls and on the airwaves of WMOA Radio. And we were talking about, with Dick Long, about his stint here of 8 or 10 years, whatever amount of time it was, but the idea that you had a lot of hats. And you mentioned Ray Rosenblum, so is there any, and this might not be a fair question, but other names of people, that you might remember that were here then?
Well, specifically, and of course, I'm getting a little older, so I don't always remember names, but I do remember Dan Latham because he was such a key person at the time for the radio station to continue under Ray and then after Ray, when the Tech College owned for a little while.
Sure.
And he also showed me a lot of things we needed to do in order to get on the air when we were out at a ball game or whatever. And I wish I could remember some of the other names because there were some people here. I remember when Earl Buck was here because he always used to talk about his Uncle John.
Sure. That's great.
But he always, I don't remember whether he considered himself like the gray sheep of the family or whatever,
right.
But because his cousin took over for his uncle, and he didn't have that pull, apparently, as his uncle pulling for him like he did for his son. But that's part of the deal, too.
Sure.
We had a lot of people come through here in sales. That was one thing,
Yeah.
and that's not unusual for any radio station. Some of the other names I remember and I wish I could think of Dick's last name, but he came back after being here.
Dick Geyer?
Dick Geyer, when
Yeah.
he was here years before I came, and then went off to do something else, and then came back. That was wonderful, working with him and some of the other people that were on the air.
Yeah, Dick Sams, I think, was another name in the news end of things as well. A lot of these guys we'll be speaking to on the radio, not the late Dick Geyer, but Dan Latham and Dick Sams and some other names as we celebrate 75 years of radio. In terms of creating programming, and I think we did this, or you did it, and I watched, but I've done a lot since then, and that is well before ESPN came around, we were trying to come up with a unique program, and I think it was simply called the Scoreboard Show or Saturday Scoreboard Show, but it was an all-day affair, as I recall, and not as easy to pick up your phone and gather scores as it was, but we would be on the air just stretches at a time, filling people in on college football scoreboard. So give me, if you have any recollections of that.
Well, what I mostly remember about that is what you're saying, is that It was not easy to come up with some of these scores because if we were trying to deal with the wire service, they sometimes would be hours behind
Sure.
with activity. And the games on TV were not like they are now, where there would be maybe just a couple of games on TV at that time, where you can watch how many right now. I think that they said that the first weekend of the season that the ESPN networks is going to try and broadcast 100 games in that one weekend.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have 100 games all season long back then. But that was part of trying to keep up with the current, trying to watch the current game and trying to see what any other way that you could come up with scores.
I think we had the old UPI or AP ticker too, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
that's what I'm saying. That was the one that you got the score, but you didn't always get the score in a timely manner.
Right. Yeah.
That was not unusual, though, because sometimes the news did not come over in a timely manner there. But there was no immediacy like there is now. That was probably one of the most immediate things that we tried to do, is try and get people current scores. And it was not that easy to do. And I would imagine right now on the radio, that's probably not an easy thing to do now either.
Right.
Because seeing something is a lot easier than hearing it. I try to listen sometimes to the sports, and somebody will read the scores so fast that I don't even remember who was playing whom.
Right. And it is the nature of the business, specifically as it relates to over-the-air traditional radio. If you can't create compelling radio, then you're going to lose listeners to some other medium. I thank you for allowing us to do that right this minute, by the way, because this to me is compelling radio. And in a time when I'm just getting into the biz, you and your wife Barb took me in and invited me to dinner and did things that wouldn't expect. And I know we're not that much difference age-wise, but in the business world, I was a newbie, and I think at the time, the owner's son, and there's a lot of things that come into it that there is a grand appreciation for that. And the idea that you would come in here as well. Tell the listeners about Hawaii. There's probably 100 people right now say, wait. He lives in, how did he end up in Hawaii? So how do you get there?
Well, the first time we went to Hawaii was when we were actually here. And Barb's business sent her there for a seminar.
Okay.
For an accounting seminar in Hawaii.
Wow, okay.
So the ironic thing was, she would go to the seminar in the morning, and she would meet me at noon, and I would be sitting down at the bar having a Mai Tai at noon, waiting for her to get off of her seminar, and then we would go out and see the sights. And there are so many sights to see on Maui.
Absolutely.
So then a few years later, we went back again on vacation. Then a few years later, we went back again on vacation until we had been there 6 times, and that was in 2000. We went there, and we said, we should live here. It's really nice here. It's really cold, and that's when we were in Finley. It's really cold in Finley.
Yeah, that is for sure.
In December. And so she talked to somebody that was there, and so when we got in a situation where we said, we're going to move away from Finley to a warmer place. That was after I went to work 5 days in a row, and it was 15 below zero, 5 straight days in a row.
Oh, my goodness.
That will drive you out of town.
Yeah.
So we moved there in May of 2001. We took 6 suitcases, 3 each, full of stuff, clothing, just clothing and knickknacks, and came back here a month later to get 6 more suitcases full of stuff. That's all we moved there. We sold everything else.
Wow.
And moved there, and she had a job 30 days later, and then 6 months later I was working. So
yeah,
it was a pretty sweet deal, but it was something that not everybody does.
That's great.
We didn't have any kids. That makes a difference too.
Sure. All right. For the listeners, everyday Hawaiian shirt, because that's what he's got on right now. Is that an everyday thing?
This is what I wear to work, yes.
Okay. I love it. Dick Long, a lot of folks maybe thought I was brought up under the Big John realm of learning the biz, but Dick Long is the one that taught me the biz right out of the gate. And Dan Latham on the sales end. We'll have a chat with him as well as we celebrate 75 years. I thank you, good friend. Great to see you. For the listeners, he looks the same, and I will. And I will. No, he still has a full head of hair, and it's a little gray compared to what it was. But we will post on our social media a picture of one of our it's probably our very first year that we did that photo shot that went on the back of the Tiger program when we were, Dick was play-by-play, I was color for the Merida High School Tigers. And so we'll post that on our social media so you can see us back in the day, so to speak. Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks.
All right. Dick Long, his wife Barb joining us well here in the studio as we celebrate 75 years of local radio.